Hey, what's up, everybody? And welcome to your Tuesday edition of the Post Up with David Grubb right here on Boot Crew Media. I, of course, am David Grubb. Welcome to the show. We're going to start with a preview of tonight's third game of the Summer League schedule out in Vegas for the New Orleans Pelicans as they take on the Portland Trail Blazers. This game is all about one matchup as far as I'm concerned, and that's the battle of the big men, Derik Queen and Hansen. All right, let's start with the good because there is some good, even though the Pelicans are 0-2 so far. For Queen in particular, he has struggled, but he's been rebounding very well through 2 games, averaging almost 12 rebounds a game in just under 27 minutes. That is great rebounding. Those are great rebounding numbers, even though I think that they, again, I said this yesterday, I think they are a little bit inflated because of the incredible amount of missed shots in these first 2 games. But no doubt, you have to be encouraged when somebody at least is grabbing the rebounds that are available. You'd like to see him pick up the offensive rebounding a bit, particularly when Yves Missi is not on the floor, because that's a lot of how Derik Queen is going to get his opportunities as a second unit player. And as a rookie, he's going to have to convert some of those second chance opportunities that are available when your teammates miss shots. Certainly some of that comes with time and just learning how to read people, what their misses start to look like. That takes familiarity. So I'm not going to critique that in that sense. His rebounding has been very good so far, though, again, these little things that are room for improvement are more about experience rather than raw ability at this stage. But once you get past his rebounding, everything else has not been at the level I'd say that you'd want to see out of Derik Queen. He's shooting 42.9% from the floor. That's not great. He's turning it over 4.5 times a game. That's as many field goals per game as he's averaging right now. That's not great. That's really inefficient. And on the defensive end, you have noticed that he's had this lack of foot speed, his inability to slide left and right. He struggles in space. He doesn't get into a real good defensive position against quicker players. And he's only averaging half a block, 1 block per game. 1 block over the first 2 games. And for a guy who's 6'9", 6'10", 240 pounds, you'd like to see him impose his will a bit more around the basket, both on offense and defense. The Pelicans struggle with rim protection. Yves Missi's done a decent job of blocking shots so far in the Summer League, but he has not really made a presence on the interior, as in both games. The Pelicans have been beaten up pretty much on the inside by their opponents. So for Derik Queen in particular, going back to him in this matchup, he does not have the same luxury that a normal 13th pick would because of what the Pelicans gave up to get him. You gave up potentially 2 lottery picks. Potentially. Again, that's potentially. I want to make sure that people don't. One of the things that I'm just going to take a little side route right here. One of the things I have a problem with, and I know it's something that I shouldn't really worry about, but one of the things I have a problem with is people listening to one sentence that I say and extrapolating an entire argument from the sentence and not listening to everything else, the context around it. So when you make a critical comment, or when you make a comment that says this thing is good, but these things can be better, that's not hating. It's not saying that this is trash. I don't think anybody's heard me say that about anything. I don't come out here and use those kind of terms. But what I do say is I look at the basketball of this and where could the basketball be more effective in order for the Pelicans to win basketball games? And I think that's the point that we're all here for, right? I will say this again as well. If you want blind loyalty, this is not the show for you. Okay? If you want me to only tell you the things that are good, I can do that. I can give you that show. But I won't like it, and I don't think you'd like it. I think watching it, it would come off as inauthentic and fake. If you want me to just give you positive news about this team, whenever there is positive news, I'm glad to share it. I'm glad to share it. Somebody marked in my comments that ultimately, for the good of business, I should want the Pelicans to do well. And they're exactly right. Business is better when the Pelicans do well. I want them to do well. More people read my articles, more people watch my shows, more people call me to do interviews on TV and on radio around the country when the Pelicans are doing well. When they're doing poorly, it's a lot harder to find stories. It's a lot harder to find angles. I don't want them to do poorly. But I just needed to say that because it gets a little annoying to go into my comments, and I try to respond to them when I can. If they're respondable, if there's something that's worthy of response, I try to do that as often as I can. But it really drives me when I see clearly that people are taking one sentence of an argument and using that to define the whole thing when there are other things that go into it And any kind of conclusion that someone comes to should have multiple layers of factual support. And I try to give that as best I can. You can disagree with the conclusions. That's fine. It don't bother me if you disagree with the conclusions. But pay attention to the argument so that you can know what you're disagreeing with. That's all. But getting back to this, let's go back, bring this back. So, as I said, the Derik Queen, the trade holds so much over his head as a 13th pick, whereas normally you would not expect certain things from that player. You're hoping for some type of good minutes. You're hoping, for some development. But Derik Queen has been put in a position where he has to contribute in year one. The Pelicans have to be good in year one in order to make the trade justifiable based on what's happening next year, because there are more and more reports that while the 2026 draft is stocked, 2027 and 2028, scouts are already worried about those classes and what players could be available. Those are less talented drafts. So the Pelicans opted out of what people view as the most talented draft of what will be of this 8-year period from 2020 to 2028. This 2026 draft is supposed to be the most talented of that group. The Pelicans have opted out of that draft to take 2 players in 2025 and no players in 2026. That puts the pressure on Derik Queen, not Jeremiah Fears as much, because people are looking at him as an 18-year-old and he's got things to figure out. We'll get back to Queen's specific role and how the Pelicans can use him later in the show, but I just want to talk about this matchup in particular. So on the other side of this for Derik Queen, and we know he has to be ready to play by the time the season rolls around, and there's room for growth. We've seen players struggle in Summer League before. But the question is, if Derik Queen looks like this in some ways, with being so slow and being ground bound, not an exceptional athlete to finish above the rim, he's going to rely on his subtleties of his game. It's going to be more difficult for him in the NBA. So you want to start seeing him utilize those skills a bit better and start asserting himself. On the other side, when you look at Hansen, he's had 2 very interesting games in his first 2. He was taken higher than people expected at 16. The Blazers already had Donovan Clingan in the fold, and he's 7'2", but you've taken now 2 7-footers who give you 2 different styles of play. So with Hansen, you're getting a player with passion, with passing vision and a very nice soft touch around the basket. That skill has been evident. Those levels of skills have been evident in these first 2 games for him. He has drawn rave reviews from the scouts and the executives that have been in Las Vegas because they are amazed at how comfortable he looks handling the basketball, distributing, facilitating offense for his team. He is another player who's physically raw. He needs to get his strength up. But for both of these guys who have been compared to Nikola Jokic, for the way that they handle the basketball, the way that they pass, and both have talked about how they, looked at Jokic's game, Yang looks more closely to reaching his, at least in the early stages, tapping into that talent than Queen does. So for the Pelicans overall, to have these 2 prospects going at each other in this game, it's a great gauge for Derik Queen to find out what he's doing, because he's gone up against multiple talented rookies so far, and he struggled against them. He needs to do better. So you look back. Again, the Pelicans have lost 8 straight Summer League games, dating back now to 2023. And their last 5, they've lost those by an average of 9 points per game. You are not playing for a championship in July. No one cares if you bring home the Summer League trophy, though it would be nice. But this is still a results-based business. And when your top pick isn't wowing people and your 13th pick isn't wowing people and the roster as a whole looks out of sync, when you're trying to build a culture that says we are trying to win now, but also cultivate talent, then these things matter. And as we talked about yesterday, when you look at the numbers, Summer League numbers in some way are indicative of what you're going to see in a player's first year. I will say this, we need to revisit those numbers at the end of Summer League, because we've seen the first 2 numbers for Queen and Fears, but we need to go back and revisit this at the end of Summer League and see if there's more progress. If they continue to struggle through these next few games, I think it will be not necessarily a cause for concern, but what it means is the Pelicans may have to make more moves, because if you're going to build this team out around Zion Williamson and you say you're going to win now, which is what the impression you're getting from these moves that they've made lately, as far as with the veterans that they've brought in, then you need to go all in. And there are more players you need to move in order to get better to win this year. You can keep Fears and Queen on the developmental track, but you've got to put more talent on that bench around those guys, because I would think that their contributions, just both in minutes and in points and in all the areas of the game, are going to be limited in year one. They just are. These are two developmental players in different stages, of course, but they are not. At this stage, they don't look like they're ready to be regular rotation players in the NBA from day one. They don't look, neither one of them, looks like they have a skill to depend on that's going to get them on the court quickly. For Fears, it's an inability to score right now because of the height difference that he's dealing with and learning how to, and his struggles to shoot the basketball consistently. And then for Queen, it's the struggle defensively to be on the floor, because right now he just is overmatched by the players that he plays against. So for New Orleans tonight, is trying to stop that summer league slide and seeing what you can get out of Derik Queen more so. Again, I think the pressure tonight is on Queen more so than Fears, though you would like to see Fears shoot that basketball a bit better. We will find out late tonight because it's a 9:00 start out in Vegas for the New Orleans Pelicans. All right. Joe Dumars has spoken up after Herb Jones has officially signed his extension with the New Orleans Pelicans. As you know, 3 years for him on that extension. So if you're worried about that status of Herb Jones going forward, then, that worry is gone. The Pelicans have him for 5 years, the next 5 years. And I think one way to look at this, and I know that folks are going to focus on the 3 years themselves, and it starts at around just over 21 million and goes up to 23 in the final year of that Herb's age 31 season. I think you look at this more of like, this is a 5-year contract averaging around 17 to 18 million dollars a year for Herb Jones. If that's the case over those 5 years, when you look at it that way, I think that that's still a relative bargain for Herb, who is without doubt one of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA. Joe Dumars came out and said that Herb's contract is one of the best deals in the NBA. Of course, he's going to say that, but he flat out remarked, this is a $100 million player. And I think that quite frankly, if Herb had waited, and he had earned another this year, an all NBA defensive nod, which you'd have to bet that he would if he's healthy. He'll be able to do that. So if Herb is getting an all defensive nod and he had waited, his contract could be worth much more. But I think for he and the Pelicans, this was an opportunity to establish some continuity in a place that both he wants to be and where the Pelicans want him to be. And I think you look around the league, and while Pelicans fans have valued Herb Jones really highly, there is a school of thought that Herb Jones is a luxury that the Pelicans cannot afford. And I would say to that, yes, there's absolutely some risk, and that the contract doesn't become a bargain if the Pelicans are losing. But I would say that that's the case for any starter on this team. If the Pelicans are really bad this year, Jordan Poole's contract is going to look like an albatross. If they're really bad, Zion Williamson's $40 million, which is guaranteed today, will look like a bad contract. If Trey Murphy somehow misses 30 games again because he's injured, then his contract extension will look like a deal that's kind of dangerous for the Pelicans. It is what it is. You take risks sometimes with your signing, and I think if you're going to take a risk, a guy like Herb Jones is a low-risk player. The reward may not be as high going in the future if you think that he's not going to expand his offensive game, but he is a low-risk player who raises your floor. And I think he raises your ceiling. Because when the team is at its best, Herb Jones is playing well on both ends of the floor. And he has been an underrated, I would say, offensive contributor, because while his scoring numbers have never been great, the offense is significantly better with him on the floor because he knows what to do. You don't have to tell him where to be. He knows where to stand. He knows where to go. He knows when to cut. He knows what plays to make. He may not make the shot every time he takes it, but he's not taking bad shots. He's not doing things he can't do. Herb Jones makes the team better, but there's absolutely risk. He's 25 years old. You've got him for these 5 more seasons. He's going to be 31 going into that final season of the deal. But if you are getting his extended prime into his early 30s and his contract is $23 million, and it'll be in an NBA where the cap will likely go up somewhat over those years, I think relatively speaking, his deal becomes less of a problem in a league where right now Devin Booker is going to make more than $60+ million. And if you ask me, and I'm going to be real straight about this, we're talking about both of those players, both of them appeared in the playoffs about the same amount of times. Devin Booker's gotten out of the first round how many times? Once. So if you're investing in somebody, it can be a bad investment no matter what you're doing if your team doesn't win. And that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying Herb Jones is equal to Devin Booker. No, see, this is what I talk about when people say they'll run with something. I'm not saying they're equal. What I'm saying is every contract can look bad if your team isn't winning. Doesn't matter what the value of it is. Doesn't matter who the player is. I think the Los Angeles Lakers right now are looking at LeBron James' contract. It's great for LeBron. It's appropriate for the value he brings to the league. But for the Los Angeles Lakers now, who are trying to get out from under that deal, it ain't a great deal. So winning influences everything in this. And I think that's the thing for Herb Jones. His responsibility will be to elevate his offensive game. He needs to continue the arc that we saw before he got hurt, of his shooting getting better, of him taking more shots. I believe he has to get his 3-point attempts above 5 per game this season as he stays on the floor, because he's not going to get a lot of twos except in transition or on cuts. The 3-point shot is what's going to ultimately define his value on the offensive end. Can he make those corner shots in particular? Think of a Bruce Bowen type, who Bruce became able to knock down that corner with proficiency. And that's what it's going to have to be for Herb Jones. But what the Pelicans do get out of this deal, and yeah, you're not locking up a number 1 or a number 2 guy, but he's, relatively speaking, you'd say he's probably your 3rd most important player behind Zion and Trey Murphy. And what this extension does is it gives the Pelicans some cost certainty. You know exactly what Herb Jones is on for the books. You don't have to worry about his price going up if he got, again, an all-NBA nod this year or next year. He's not going into free agency. You don't have to deal with those things in 2 years. You have Herb Jones. And I think if a trade becomes necessary, it is a fixed number now for the other teams that are looking at it. And I don't think that, there will be a problem in trading his deal, because there are bad contracts traded every season that people say are untradeable. It happens every year. Contracts that people deem untradeable are ultimately traded to somebody. And I think if Herb Jones goes on the market at some point, whether it's this year, next year, 2 years down, 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road, if Herb Jones goes on the market and he's consistent in his play, there will be a market for him as a veteran going around. Like we've seen it with Marcus Smart get traded from the Celtics to the Grizzlies, and it didn't work, but the Grizzlies took a shot. We've seen players who might be a little bit overpaid get moved. We saw the Celtics get out for some contracts that people didn't think would be easy to ship out, and they were able to do it this offseason. So I think if you want to make a deal is always possible. I get that people can say his value is at the highest now, but I think his value to the Pelicans is still at its highest. And I think ultimately that's how you have to make decisions. Is this player more valuable to us, or are they more valuable to others? And I think right now, if you're Joe Dumars, you're looking at this as right now Herb Jones is more important to us than to someone else around the league. So the Pelicans have one of the best defenders in the league on a relatively team-friendly contract. There's a lot of work to do for this team in building out the roster the rest of the way. But I think ultimately they got this one right based on what the costs are currently and what the cost could be in a year or 2 years when Herb would become his extension could become more expensive. So I think Joe Dumars speaking out and saying how big a part of the culture is, and he remarked that Herb Jones is exactly the kind of player that they want to have, exactly the kind of player they want to emulate. This is the DNA of the basketball team that he wants to build. And I think for Pelicans fans who have latched onto Herb Jones from the moment that he really got to New Orleans as an unheralded second-round pick, to have Herb Jones in the fold, I think means something to Pelicans fans. There is something to be said ultimately for continuity in an organization and having some of those players. Perhaps Herb Jones is this Pelicans team Udonis Haslem. And the thought could be, yes, again, that Herb Jones is a luxury that the Pelicans can't afford if they're not good. That time will tell. But when you look at the players, and I've said this again about the franchise stalwarts, is none of them have left on good terms. None of them left in ways that Pelicans fans could be proud of, or ways that allowed them to have the proper send-off with that player. And I think there's a strong desire to have one of those people, to have a guy that's just your player, whether it was a Nate McMillan for the Sonics in the 80s and 90s, whether you're talking about a Nick Collison for the Sonics and Thunder when they moved, and he has his jersey in the rafters, and he was never an all-star and those types of things. Udonis Haslem will have his jersey in the rafters soon enough in Miami. There are certain players for organizations that just matter because they were around and they set the tone. And I think that value is something that Joe Dumars values a lot. He comes from a culture of players that setting the tone in the locker room was very important, whether it was him as a player, whether it was in his championship years as an executive in Detroit. Those teams had a distinctive culture about them, whether you're talking about the Bad Boys Pistons or you're talking about the ones that won the championship over the Los Angeles Lakers. The impression was that there was a very tight team culture built around the veterans on that squad. And I think Joe Dumars is saying that Herb Jones is the template for that in New Orleans now. When you look at Derik Queen's role, let's go back to him and how the Pelicans can best use him. And I think that the defensively, and I got to give credit to Chris Connor, this was just how do you pair Derik Queen? And he said, like, if you're going to play Derik Queen, you almost have to play him with Carlo Makovich, because if you're playing Queen at the 5, you need somebody who's going to spread out the floor, and that would be Carlo. If you're playing him at the 4, again, you need somebody who could stretch out the floor, and that would be Carlo. You don't have another big who could do that. So if you're playing him, you can't play him with him at the 5 and Zion at the 4. That's an awkward match. So you need somebody to help space things out. And for Derik Queen, I think that you wonder about the kind of minutes that he can really get in year one. Because if you're talking about the center position, Eve Misi is going to play 20 minutes at center, right? And let's give another 20 minutes to Kevon Looney at center. That leaves 8 minutes a game. You got 48 total minutes per position. That leaves 8 minutes a game for Derik Queen at the center spot. At the power forward spot, you're going to give Zion, let's say 20 of his minutes come at the power forward spot, and the rest of his minutes are at the 3. So let's say you get 20, 25 minutes out of Zion at the 4, and you get 7 to 8 minutes of him at the 3 for his 30 plus minutes. But go back to that 4 spot. So if he's playing 20 to 25 minutes, that means there's 23 minutes left to divvy up. You got Sadiq Bey getting power forward minutes. You got Trey Murphy probably playing some small ball 4 minutes. Where in that group, how many minutes do you allocate for Derik Queen? So if he can get 8 minutes at center, and again, Carlo is going to play as well, probably. If you give him 8 minutes at center, how many minutes are available at power forward if you're going to play Carlo? I just don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how they figure out what to do with Derik Queen defensively and offensively, because if you're pairing him with anybody on this team, on this first unit, it's really almost impossible. It's really almost impossible. So I think that the thing for him is, how does he find his role consistently on the court? How does he get into a situation where he can be a regular contributor? And I think that that's going to put a lot on Willie Green creatively to find ways to use him. And the biggest thing is going to be a change in tempo, because I think with Queen, you're not going to be in transition as much. He's not going to run the floor that way. He's not going to finish above the rim. So you have to set him up in the half court, which means a lot more 2-man game for him and whomever is running the point at that time. I think that's where the Pelicans really have to allow Derik Queen to either play with only shooters, more so than even with the Zion Williamson, is you've got to put shooters to allow him the space to work in the post, or you've got to get him into pick and roll situations on a consistent basis while he's on the floor to keep him engaged offensively and hope that carries over the defensive end early on. You got to give him something if you're going to utilize him in that regard. Lastly, I just wanted to look at Antonio Reeves, because he is an interesting piece of this puzzle, because Antonio got cut. And instead of going away and trying to find another home, he ends up on the Pelicans Summer League squad, and he's led the team in scoring after 2 games. He's shooting the ball. He's the only player on the team shooting it at 50% or better. He's at 25% from 3, but he's only taken 4 threes in the first 2 games. So you'd like to see him increase that volume. But Antonio Reeves is making it hard for Jordan Hawkins. And Jordan Hawkins, who for whatever reason is not part of this Summer League team, maybe they told him they didn't need him. Maybe they want to make sure that they got these other guys minutes. But I would have suggested to Jordan Hawkins that he go to Vegas for Summer League and try to get some on-court time just to gauge where he is in his improvement. I think if you're the Pelicans, you should have wanted to see him in game action. But I think Antonio Reeves is sitting out there pushing the Pelicans for that backup guard spot. And, he's been a much more consistent shooter over his first season plus with the Pelicans than Jordan Hawkins has been in 2+ years. So I think if you're the Pelicans and as you watch Antonio Reeves, the impetus to trade Jordan Hawkins to try to get some more front court depth, it seems as if that siren could be getting louder because the Pelicans still have holes on this roster, particularly when it comes to size and athleticism in the front court. They have to get better there. And I think if there was one candidate on this team amongst the second unit players, Jordan Hawkins would be the least useful and the most replaceable, right? Because if you take anybody else on that bench who doesn't fill a role that's necessary right now, if you could trade Jose Alvarado, but you don't have a backup point guard right now, as long as DeJounte Murray's out, and that's one of Willie's favorite players, so he's not going anywhere in the immediate future. We've already talked about the two rookies. They aren't going. 3 rookies, Micah Peavy too. They're not going anywhere, right? In the short term. Carlo's not going. Eve's not going. Kevon Looney's not going. Sadiq Bey's not going. It's 8 players right there. So the only one left is Jordan Hawkins. That's it. It's Jordan Hawkins, and he's the only player left that you can really feel like if you let him go immediately, you could replace him tomorrow. The rest of these guys, I mean, you could move Sadiq Bey, sure, and pick up another piece if that's what you want to do. But the easiest person to lift out of this thing right now and replace is Jordan Hawkins. Even if you believe in his potential, the rotational minutes are not there for him. His salary is bigger than his production. And as a first-round pick, he's not played up to that level. So I think if you're Antonio Reeves, you are proving that the Pelicans have made a mistake. And if he continues to do so, then what does that mean for the future for Jordan Hawkins? All right, that's going to be it for the show today. Of course, the game, again, is tonight at 9 p.m. We may be on afterwards. Don't quote me on that, but we may be on afterwards. We might do it on Wednesday. But in the meantime, make sure you hit the like, make sure you subscribe, make sure you share, and hit the notification bell as well so you don't miss anything. Follow me on social media at DM Grubb on Instagram, Twitter. You can also find me on Blue Sky, TikTok, Facebook. So I hope you enjoyed the show, and I will be back on Thursday to talk about the Pelicans' 3rd Summer League game and whatever news and notes we may have in the meantime. Y'all have a great day. See you on Thursday.